So that's where the first like viral video you ever had was when you were at One America?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, after the Chattanooga terrorist attacks. I kind of went after President Obama at the time.
So how was that? Because
that was crazy to me.
Yeah, so most people, you know, when a video goes viral, it's very much a, like, it's a positive thing for everybody. Like, everybody's happy about it. Like, a few friends of mine have put out viral stuff, right? And it's like, oh yeah, like, high five, you put out something viral, cool. And when you put out something viral, it comes with a package of a big, like, bottle of hate, right? So talk to me about, like, the first time where you started, like, reading through some stuff and you're like, oh my goodness, these people are, like, actually hating me. How did that whole situation unfold?
I think I had a little bit of a dose of it just all the way through, just being a conservative. I think that was the time, and when those came out, that was leading up to the 2016 election. This was 2015, so things were heating up, things were intense. Yeah, so I mean, I was used to that environment. So, and those, when I went after Obama, I actually had a lot of support for that. It was very military focused, and so there wasn't as much hate in that commentary as, of course, now I get when I talk about other things. But going viral is something I never planned to do it. I didn't put it out there. Someone else took a segment of my show that I did every single night, 5 days a week, and they recorded it and put it out there. So I was stunned when it went viral because that wasn't something I was trying to do. But I knew when I did it that it was powerful. And I knew that it would get a reaction. I just didn't think it was going to be a viral reaction. But then after that, it was some people then, when they get the viral bug, then everything, they want to go viral in everything that they do. So I get that a lot from people. They say, oh, are you saying these things to purposely be controversial and polarizing and make people mad so you can get attention and go viral? The answer is no. If I were to be someone like that and I were to do that for the purpose of going viral, I would have had 15 minutes of fame and then I would have been done. Because when you start taking the passion out of it, you start taking the work out of it, and you start taking the authenticity out of it, that's when you're going to fail every single time. My intent in anything I do is not to go viral. It's to speak from the heart, to be passionate. I talk about things I'm passionate about. I don't need to create them. I don't need to engineer it. This is how I am. This is what I believe. I believe very strongly in a set of things. And when I talk about those things, they're probably going to go viral. And it's not because I'm saying things that are necessarily just because they're controversial. Yes, that's part of it. But it's also because you can feel the passion that I'm speaking with. And it's very easy to be a shock jock, and there's a lot of people that have tried to do it since. They want to go viral. They want to imitate this career that I've built. But you see it's kind of hollow because they're doing it to make money. They're doing it to be famous. They're doing it to go viral. They're not doing it because they feel it deep within their bones. And that's the thing. People can love me or hate me, as long as they know that I'm being authentic. That is the most important thing. And people are still going to say that it's not. I know who I am. People are going to call me names. I know who I am. It really doesn't bother me anymore.
But it had to at first.
It really, quite honestly, didn't.
Really?
No. I've always had a very strong sense of self. So if I'm saying something and people, especially because if people are criticizing me for my intelligence, sometimes it hurts a little bit. When fellow conservatives criticize my intelligence, that's what really actually bugs me, because I know that I'm not unintelligent. But when people say, oh, you're this, or they call me names, or they say disgusting, horrible things about me, I have to respect you to respect what you say about me. If you're calling me a nasty name, if you're calling me outside of my name, if you're labeling me something that I'm not, it doesn't affect me because I know who I am. And I think if more people had that confidence in themselves, then they wouldn't worry about validation from everybody else all the time. Young people now, especially with social media, they are so worried about their likes, their comments, their retweets, their views. That is where they get the validation. And if someone says that just one thing mean about them, they could say 100 nice things, but that one person that says that one mean thing can just completely devastate them. And that's not freedom to me. Freedom to me is being able to look at it, take the good with the bad, not let my head swell when people say great things, and not let me be completely shattered when people say horrible things. There's a balance there that I've been able to find through doing this for several years and having several moments of controversy along the way.
Props to you. Yeah, props to you for keeping a level head.
So you have a new show called World Class. What do you think makes someone world class?
It's a good question, Natasha. That's kind of why I started the show, to be honest, was I wanted to answer that question for myself, because I wanted to go have more conversations with world-class people and ask them that, like, what have you done to get to where you are. But if I were just to say something off the top of my head with the people I've had conversations with Build Your Network and things, I think that it's just the relentless pursuit of perfecting your craft. I think that's what makes somebody world-class. And if you look at all the top people that are out there, you know, talent has something to do with it. In every world-class people are talented, right? Like there's no getting around that. If you're world-class at something, it's probably because you're somewhat talented at that. But world-class is also people who work really hard. Like talent is not enough to get you to world-class. Talent is enough to get you good, right? It gets you recognized, maybe gets you great, maybe even
to go viral once or
yeah, sure. But to be consistently good all the time, like that's a world class. Like you look at somebody, even in the comedy world, like you look at somebody like a Jim Gaffigan, you know, really a clean comedian, which is very rare, but also he just always has new material. Right. He's prolific, always just writing more comedy, writing comedy. Like, I don't know anybody who just like keeps coming out with specials every single time. Right. And it was funny because I was having those types of thoughts and about him. I was just like, man, it seems like he's always putting out something new, you know? And a lot of comedians do one or two and then they're done, you know? And this guy's just always putting out something. And I was listening to him on Conan O'Brien recently. And he said, Conan actually said the same thing to him. And he was like, you are one of the most, you know, just consistent like comics that exist. You just always are, you continue to pursue the craft. You continue to pursue being good at what it is that you do, even though you don't have to at this point, right? Like somebody like Jim Gaffigan can sell out any arena he wants to because of his name, because of the work he's already done. He doesn't have to put in as much work as he did when he first started, but he still does. And that's what I think that makes somebody world-class is like, you got to have a little bit of talent. Like you look at somebody like a LeBron James, like he's a world-class athlete. Is he talented? Yes. There's no arguing that man is a freak of nature, like built to be an athlete, right? Just like Zion Williamson or some of these other athletes that are coming up. But if he were just that, there's so many stories of people who were talented and then made it to the league, whether it's NBA or NFL or MLB or any of these other professional sports, and just crashed and burned because they got sucked into the party scene and just wanted to, like, they blew their money on bottle service and lost sight of the thing that got them there to begin with, which was the craft. Right. And they happened to be good enough at it because they were born with a natural talent and maybe fostered it a little bit. But ultimately, the journey to becoming world class is about finding the thing that you have a little bit of natural ability in, and then just going all in and working really hard to get there. So I think it's that combination. So I just became a parent about 9 months ago.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you. His name's Cameron. And I was listening to a couple of your podcast episodes, just trying to prepare for this one. And it was the one that you brought your son on to talk before Rob Lowe.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good one.
And I found his answers to be just like, when I heard his age, I had to go back and be like, how old was this kid again? Because his answers were just really, really good and super thoughtful. And it also blew my mind that at the end of it, you made sure to say, like, look, we did not have a conversation prior to this. This is all him. Like we didn't script this and nothing. Right. Because I do have some parent friends who, you know, their kids would come on stage or they'll get on their podcast, but it's all scripted. They want them to sound awesome or whatever. So I really respected that you just said, like, let him talk. Yeah. But also his answers were amazing. So couple questions selfishly, sorry guys, on my end, as a father. Yeah. What do you do in order to instill that desire? Because he obviously has a desire to go learn things himself without you having to like push him to be like, go do this, go do that, go do that.
Ooh, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but you can't. Okay. You know, I got 3 kids. They're all different. I'm a crazy, intense entrepreneur. I've got one kid that wants to be a philosophy professor. It doesn't work that way. For whatever reason, you can't transfer your desires to your kids. And when you do, I think when you try really hard, you can get them to fake it for a little while, but then they rebel, as we've all seen. For me, I was a very high intensity dad. I felt like I could feel like I was winning if I did great dad stuff. And I'll give you a perfect example when this started, and actually sort of set the tone for the rest of my life. This one incident is I had all 3 kids. They were under 6 at the time. My wife wasn't feeling great. We were supposed to go to the beach. She's like, I'm not going to the beach. So let's find something else to do. I was like, oh, but the kids want to go to the beach. So I decided to take all 3 of them to the beach by myself. Not an easy thing as a dad and kids that young. I had 2, 4, and 6, I think. Maybe even younger. Oof. So as I'm driving there, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be torture. And then I just remember thinking to myself, you know what? What if Jeff Probst had showed up at the parking lot and said, okay, you're on Kid Survivor, and your job for the next 3 hours is to take these kids to the water, get them, have fun, feed them, bring them back, clean them up, and have a great time. And if you do that, you win the prize. Could I rally if it was a contest?
Yeah.
If there was a big prize on the line? And I was like, I totally could do that. So for the next 3.5 hours, I was competing as if there was $1 million on the line.
Yeah.
Chasing these kids around, getting them in the water, changing, having food, making jokes, having fun, like doing fun stuff, like just having the time of my life. And I don't remember if I was having fun doing this stuff, but I know I was like feeling kind of accomplished, you know, like if you're doing a Tough Mudder run, you'd be like, yeah, I just got a great time. I'm crushing this, right? Well, as again, a caveman, that I could do that. So I'm loading these kids back up in the car, and these 2 women come over, and they're like, I'm sorry, we don't mean to interrupt, but we've been watching you all day. And we just have to say, you were like the greatest dad we've ever seen. That was amazing watching you. We just couldn't resist. And I was just like, yeah, yeah. So I started developing that habit of, hey, I go to work. Hey, I come home. Like if I'm going to go dad mode, it's like out comes the cape.
Full out, yeah.
And I treat
Phil
it.
Dunphy dad
Yeah,
mode.
and I feel like, okay, we're going to crush it.
Right.
So that was good. But there's a trade-off for that. Okay, my dad did not wake up every day trying to figure out how to make me happy. Okay, my dad couldn't care less what I was going through on a day-to-day basis if it was just normal teenage stuff, right? Like his job was to educate me, prepare me, all those things for life. I'm in the mode of let's make this kid's life as easy as possible. Now, there's some great things to that. If you met my oldest son, you'd be like, he is the nicest, kindest, most generous, amazing kid ever. Not likely he'll be the next Steve Jobs. Not likely he's going to be Elon Musk, because he just hasn't been born with that fear of failure, of tough love, of figure it out for yourself or else. He will not be like, if I don't get a job, I can't eat.
Yeah.
Like there's a gift to poverty. There's a gift to hard times that parents today will not be able to give their kids. Now, I don't know what that's going to manifest itself, but your best chance is just get lucky.
Yeah.
Do the best you can and get lucky.
Shoulder type of a,
and some people need that. You know, that's what propelled me in a lot of ways. It's probably what propelled you, but I've lost that with my kids, and you'll probably lose that with yours, because that's the way our society is now.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So good luck.
Yeah, appreciate that, man. Yeah, the contest thing, that hits home for me for sure. Yeah, and that's definitely something to.
Well,
and
I train.
You look at the prize too; it's obviously much better than $1 million.
Yeah, but I train people to do that in my high intensity and high performance series, and I've worked with professional athletes and I coach teams. I train people how to do that in every situation in their life, like to get your body used to winning situations. And this great exercise, if your audience is going to go out to lunch today or whatnot, if the waitress had a contest, who was the best customer today? Who enjoyed their lunch the most?
Yeah.
And there was a contest and she was giving away a $10,000 prize. What would you do to win or get in the running?
Right.
How would you act? How would you speak? What would you look like? How would you sit in your chair? How would you talk to her when she came there? Okay. If it was a genuine contest, you act a certain way.
Yeah, totally.
And your body and brain physiologically doesn't know the difference if it's a real contest or you just think it is. It doesn't know if there's a prize or not, right? And so it isn't about that moment. It's about training your physiological makeup to be in that mode more often. Oh, I'm going to win something?
Yeah.
I'm going to win a situation? Pshoo, bang, here I am. Watch me crush it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to pick up my car at valet. Dude, if this guy was giving prizes for the best valet customer, I'd be in the top 3 for sure. Right? You can train yourself to do that. You won't do it all day, every day, but you do it more often when you really want that attitude, when you want to bring something. Now your body's used to it. That's why professional athletes practice as hard as they play.
Right.
Because they need to be in intense mode.
You can't build the habit of half-assing something.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if you look at the rest of your life, if you're someone who performs well at the office or performs well in an athletic situation, the rest of your life is probably half-ass. And if you don't think that rest of your life being half-ass and average affects your time when you want to be non-average, like, you're crazy. It does. Not just up on the practice court, not just at the office. Everywhere you are normal and average, that's what the rest of your life wants to be.
Yeah.
It's like average is chasing you down.
It's a force.
It's
like
a
gravity,
force.
Yeah.
And you got to practice it, and you can do it in any way. If you go to the movies, you're like, if there was a prize for who enjoyed this movie the most, what would I do differently? How would I sit in my chair? How would I act? And like, just those little exercises make a difference. And I'll do it sometimes just driving. Okay, the next 3 miles. If the Lord himself came down and awarded a prize, eternal life, to whoever drove these next 3 miles the best and enjoyed it the most, what would I have to do? And I guarantee people are listening to that, and it's like, close your eyes, think how you'd drive. Yeah. Think how you'd be. At home, when you're thinking about it, your chest fills up. And like, I do this on stage, and I will have 1,000 people. I could see them rising in their seats. I could see the smiles because I've told them we're going to have a who walks the next 7 steps the best. We're going to have a contest. Yeah. And I say, okay, but I need you to think about it. You can't come up here to do the contest and try to think about what you're going to do. And there's too many people. You got to know. So let's just take 15 seconds and picture how you're going to walk these 7 steps. 7 steps to $1,000. And of course, everybody's picturing themselves with their stroll or whatever, and they're all smiling and they're laughing. It's like, okay, we're not doing the contest, but you just see the point. I'm not giving you $1,000. Your boss is too cheap. That's usually my joke, but
That's perfect.
Who's been an accidental and unofficial mentor?
Unofficial mentor, I mean, there's so many of those. And really, I would say John Lee Dumas, except for that was really on purpose on my part. It was accidental on his part. It was really on purpose and strategic on my part. I wanted to learn from him. And so I did whatever I could to get around him, including buying a mastermind at his house for a weekend. And so he's become a really good unofficial mentor in my life, like somebody that I can shoot a quick text to whenever I'm running into anything, and he's always willing to help me out. Another one of those would be Jordan Harbinger. That one was probably a little bit more accidental. I knew I wanted to meet Jordan, but when I started listening to podcasts, I listened to 3 podcasts: Bigger Pockets, Jordan Harbinger's show, and Entrepreneur on Fire. So I knew I wanted to connect with Brandon Turner, John Lee Dumas, and Jordan Harbinger. JLD, since he was like his brand was all about teaching you how to podcast. I knew I wanted a podcast. He was number 1 on the list, right? But then after that, I knew I wanted to meet Jordan, and Jordan had conversations with like my childhood hero, like Shaq was on his show, and Shaq was like my idol growing up, And so I knew that I wanted to get to know Jordan a little bit better, and that's kind of turned into this just accidental mentorship type relationship where anytime I'm running into something and I need some advice, like even starting this show came directly from a conversation that I had with Jordan. So different things like that where I have been able to get the ear of somebody who I really, really respect their opinion, and they are crushing it in what it is they're doing. And I'm blessed to have those types of like unofficial mentorship type relationships in my life now.
Well, and I think it kind of speaks to the power of the podcasting thing as well, because you just listed like, here's 3 people who are crushing it. I mean, millions of downloads every month, massive people. And your connection point to most of them was like, hey, will you do my show? Right. And so I think it's really cool that like you set this, and I'm seeing that now with like my shows. Like there's people that I like for the last several years have been like, oh, I wish I could talk to them. They're so unattainable. Right. It costs a ton of money to go to this convention to see them for 2 seconds. And it's like, then you reach out and say, hey, will you talk to me for an hour and we can record it? And they're like, yeah. And you're like,
I'm stoked.
You're like, wait, you charge me like $50 for like an autograph.
Yeah, literally.
It's like, so I think that's really cool that like,
it's an in, man. Yeah. People don't understand. It's such an in. That's what I tell people all the time. Like, don't worry about your downloads. Right. Like, because people get this thing in their head where like, well, I don't want to start a show because, it's not a priority right now. And, if I want to do it, I want to do it right. And it's like, well, I agree. You should do it right. Like you should build a quality thing. But in terms of downloads, don't worry about that. Right. Who cares? Like if you only get the relationships, that by itself is worth every single hour you put into creating a show. Probably 3 years ago now is when I got into the personal development world. Yep. Started listening to podcasts. John Lee Dumas, a big mentor of mine, and one of the first podcasts I listened to. Good dude. And I started just listening to all their stuff, and then it just turned me on to this entire world of people, like what you were saying, where I was just like, oh my gosh, where were all these stories 10 years ago? Like how come I'm just now learning about this? And I felt like that being a 23-year-old, whatever I was at the time. And I'm sure people, you know, are realizing that at 40 and 45,
Yeah.
and like, man, where was this my entire life? You know, so how can we make sure that we put ourselves in environments that continue to help shape us into who we want to be?
Yeah, and that's why Tony Robbins and I, yes, he changed my life at 25, and I wrote in my journal, someday I want to meet him and thank him. Somebody introduced us together, introduced us, a mutual friend about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And
Joe Polish?
Yeah, Joe introduced us about 10 years ago. And then Tony said, all right, fly out to Chicago. And then we met really quick. And then he said, you know what, come down, meet me at my house. So I went to his house for an hour meeting. We spent like 9 hours together. And we just had so many similarities growing up. His mom and my dad were like the same exact human, and just all this stuff. And it went great. He canceled all his stuff. I stayed an extra day. And we've been dear friends ever since. Yeah. And both of us have a lot of people that want to do business with us. Him more than me, he's got 20 years on me, right? But still, every day we have people that want to do business. And sometimes it's hard because I want to do business with a lot of people, but it gets numbing because you got to focus on your own stuff.
Right, totally.
So we decided, like, let's just be buds. Like, we didn't do business together for 8 years. It was just friendship. We met 4 times a year. We talked once a week. And then a couple years ago, we just said, you know what, self-education saved our lives. Like, where would we be without Jim Rohn? Where would I be without you? Where would we be without all of this self-education, this specialized knowledge? And we said the world is finally getting it. I don't know if you know this, but right now the world is spending $455 million a day on self-education, a day.
Really?
And Forbes just came out with an article saying it's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. It's heading to $1 billion a day. Wow. So what we figured out, the world's figuring out, like, I could go to college for 4 years or 6 and have this big debt. And then when I get out, what the hell am I going to do, right? There's a whole generation of millennials right now with college debt and don't know what to do, with a higher level of angst. Mm-hmm. They're waiting 8 extra years to buy a house because they have a loan on their...
Angst and entitlement, too.
And entitlement.
Right?
And
I'm supposed to get this job.
Yeah, and
check the box.
Yeah, and not in a bad way. They're just like, they weren't taught that there's this other option. So what the world is realizing, which Tony and I love, it wasn't that cool when Tony started 40 years ago, and it wasn't even that cool when I started an infomercial 20 years ago. But now people are going, okay, I can go 4 years of college, or I can go to this weekend workshop that somebody's been in this space 5 years, 10 years, 20 years longer than me, and in a weekend, they can condense decades or years into days, and I can start off where they left off. I mean,
have you ever work on it on Monday?
I can work on it on Monday. Have you ever gone to a mastermind and literally went home Monday and transformed your business? Because I have.
Yep.
Been to 300 days of masterminds. And the world is realizing masterminds, groups, workshops, Zoom calls, online, like this online platform has given the self-education this wind, and the world is going there. So what Tony and I decided is, like, how do we fix an outdated, broken education system? And how do we make self-education the new norm? That's what him and I have been saying for 2 years. How do we make self-education the new norm? And that's when we decided to take our 60 years combined experience in this industry and say, let's teach people with a skill, an experience, a hobby, a mastery, or even a struggle you went through and now you're on the other side. How do you extract that knowledge and share it with people starting on day one? Right? Everybody said to me, what's the self-education industry, Dean, if you had to sum it up? And I guess the best way I'd sum it up is, what would it be worth, you're 27, what would it be worth to you to spend one full day with your 20-year-old self?
Oh, man, a lot.
Right?
I don't know.
There's only two answers.
Exactly.
2 answers I get, priceless or millions, right? That's what everybody says. So that's what the self-education industry is. How many people today do you think are starting off where you were when you were 20? Hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions, right? Starting off today. You have the opportunity to go back and get those that raise their hand, and more now are raising their hand than ever, in the tune of heading towards $1 billion a day, saying, hey, Travis, I don't want to spend 7 years figuring out what you did, man. Let's do a weekend Zoom workshop and tell me that. Right. And that, when Tony and I realized that, we're like, okay, but it's a little bit of the wild, wild west. Let's create a gold standard on how people can extract what they know, share it with people, find their ideal clients who want that, get paid, impact their lives, and move on.
A couple of years back, my wife's dad passed away. You know, I guess the best word I could use to describe it would be surreal. It was just a surreal time. You know, we heard the news on January 3rd that he was in the hospital, and he's 53, by the way, so not an old guy, you know, by any means. 53 years old. We found out he was in the hospital January 3rd, and then January 13th, he passed away. And that was obviously an insanely difficult time for my wife. But I think a lot of times because of that, the other party in those types of situations isn't really checked in with as much, because like because it wasn't me losing my dad, you know what I mean? So all I was doing was trying to be there for Jackie. And so it was another one of those times in my life where I just retreated inside, and all of the feelings that I was feeling during that time of like watching the person I love most in the world go through something so horrible was like all of those things were just kind of squished down further inside of me and put in with all the other emotions from the past things that I had dealt with in my own life. And so it was just like a big magnification almost of the negative thoughts and feelings that I had. And I just didn't feel like I could express them. Like I didn't feel like it was my place. I didn't feel like I was being fair to her to like bring up how I was feeling when she was going through something so horrible. And so I internalized a lot of those things. And then what happened is it ended up kind of blowing up in our marriage, and we came really close. I don't even know if I told you this, bro, but we came really close to separating and getting a divorce about a year after all this stuff happened with her dad, because it caused such a chasm between us. Looking back, I think it was just because I just further isolated myself from her and from other people, because I kept putting down the situation that I was in because it wasn't as bad as the situation she was in. And I'm not a dramatic person or an emotional person typically. And so when I feel those things and I feel some of those things boiling up, I feel like almost it's my duty to like push them back down. And so I created almost this isolation of myself in our marriage that just took me further away from her instead of bringing me closer to her, and just used temporary relief to get away from it instead of actually diving deep and dealing with the problem. And so it almost cost us our marriage, to be honest. And it was a difficult time to say the least. And but the crazy thing is, during all of that is when that's when I launched my podcast, and my online business was during all that stuff. And so it was just kind of like all this stuff is happening, but at the same time, I still got to get up and do what I got to do, because life isn't ever like, there's never going to be a perfect time. And people are always waiting for the perfect time. Like, oh, now it's just not the right time. Now it's just not the right time. Okay, well, when is going to be the right time? Because like people have been saying for a long time, well, I don't have any time. And then all of a sudden, like the coronavirus hits and we're all stuck at home doing nothing, and you still don't have the time. Like, when are you going to find the freaking time, man? Like, you just got to get in and do things and work through it. And so that's what I did at the time. And there's a lot of things that I would do differently now if I were in that position again. But at the time, I just kind of downplayed my own emotions, my own feelings during all of that. And it just kind of got in me and made me be that lonely island again, all by myself, and further isolated me from everything, which was a huge struggle. And so that's definitely helped shape me into the husband that I am now. It's helped shape me into the father that I am now, because it made me realize certain things about myself that I really didn't like, and that I knew wouldn't be a good example for my son, and things that I really had to face head on and really change. So I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but
no, I think that's really, I mean, that kind of stuff's important. I resonate a lot with that story. I mean, we were married for like 3 months, and, found out we were pregnant, had a miscarriage, and went from that to losing a job like 2 months later, 3 months later, like having to move back to our home state, find like a regular job again after doing something we love doing. And it's like, I spent all that time thinking like, this should be affecting me more. Like, it did affect me a lot at the time, but I was like, this should be affecting me more than it is. And then you get to a point where like a year later, you were like, why do I feel like this? Why do I have these emotions and this feeling? And it's like, oh, I never dealt with it at the time. I was so busy. And especially for, when you're in a position of being a husband or a dad, like you have this thing where you feel like I have to, whether it's society puts that on you or you put that on yourself, you feel this obligation to carry everybody through crisis. And so like for me, like it was this year when like we were making better money than ever before. We were more comfortable than ever before. Like we had security for the first time in like our entire marriage. And it was like, oh, now I'm depressed and miserable. And it's like, it's because I never dealt with all of those things I felt this stigma around to talk about. And I think you've done a good job, even just one-on-one with me, but I think just with people you've talked to, addressing that stigma of like, it's okay. Like being an entrepreneur is hard. Being a human being is hard. And you need to be able to talk openly. Like the fact that you're willing to share that to your audience is something that's like really impactful. And I think that's the kind of stuff that people need to hear. It's like people need to know how to send a good email to someone they want to get on their podcast. But I think there's also people who are like, I can't even muster up the strength to write that email right now. And so I think that's the kind of stuff people are going to be interested to hear.
I'm going to say a quote that you have said, and I want you just to give me like a quick deep dive into that quote.
Sure.
Cool. So first one, there is no greater revenge than unmitigated success.
So that's actually a quote. I think that's Frank Sinatra, if I remember right. And one, I think that people really have to understand that you're only going to get so far with beauty. You're only going to get so far with love, and I'll call it 80%. You're going to get 80% of the way there. Mm-hmm. And the vast majority of the time, that's where you should be. But there's something built into us where you need the dark side. You need the rage, the anger to propel you forward in acute moments. I don't think you ever want to stay there for long. Mm-hmm. And they've shown this scientifically. If you take somebody and have them submerge their arm in an ice bucket and have 30 people do it, whatever, you'll get a median amount of time that people can leave it in. If right when they're about to pull it out, you tell them, don't take it out, get angry. You can yell, cuss, do anything you want. Just express rage. They can leave it in 30% longer. Wow. So our ability to endure pain is increased by the amount that we're able to harness the anger, the aggression. And I find that people either don't know how to be aggressive, they don't know how to channel that rage, that anger, or it's all they do. Both are problematic. Yeah. If your only tool is rage and anger, you'll self-destruct, you'll burn out, you'll alienate everybody. If, on the other hand, you hold it, you reserve it for those key moments, you endure what you can endure, but right before you give in, instead of giving in, you go farther than anybody else because you know how to harness that stuff. So there are definitely times that I think about where I'm just fucking exhausted, man, to my core, like to the marrow of my bones. I cannot go any farther. Yeah. And in those moments, I think of the people that I know want me to fail. I think of the people that sincerely believe I'm going to fail and that they will do anything they can to trip me up. I think of people that told me, dude, it's too late. You're never going to make it. I actually have a list. And I know who the people are. I'm thinking of them right now. And in those moments, I won't give them the satisfaction. And I am going to be successful and then not say a fucking word about it. And just let the success speak for itself. But I've got to tell you, there have been times, part of the reason that I've been as successful as I have is in those moments where I'm just as tired as anybody else, where I want to go to the party like everybody else. I don't because of the darkness, not because I'm thinking, oh my God, I really want to help people. Right. That's where I spend 80% of my time. But homie, there is 20% of the time, it's nothing but rage.